Déjà. Ou enfin. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Je suis très contente d'être parmi vous. And la sekut Peter tamani khatigi yaming upigo supunga. I'm saying I'm quite proud to be sitting beside Peter, as he is a role model for us Inuit. And so I'm very happy to be presenting with him. Good morning. So it is good to be here with you today. I appreciate having been invited to share my thoughts and experiences on dignity as it relates to Inuit. Thank you to Université Laval et surtout merci Dr. Thomas de Coninck et Bernard, merci beaucoup de m'avoir invité. And all who helped you to organize this very interesting conference on the need to protect our environment and how it relates to dignity. I must say I regret not attending the whole conference. I was not here yesterday, but I'm certainly looking forward to listening to the rest of the conference participants. Jean Désy was speaking earlier this morning, and he said he has been in Puvelnitur, where I was born, and yet I had never laid eyes on him until somewhere in a conference or a colloque, and we participated in a colloque and also saw him at La Petite Rivière Saint-François during Christmas while we were sliding down a hill. So that's the story of my meeting with Jean Désy. Now let's see if this works. So I've been asked to share what I think of dignity in the Inuit sense, though I am hard-pressed as I look within myself, as I reflect on it, about what exactly I will say and what exactly that means to us, Inuit. It is a challenge for me to simply define human dignity. You could just say, well, you know, human dignity is individually based, but I couldn't go there, and I couldn't even define it in the conventional sense, such as the one in the Western world, a world I am educated in. But how lucky I have been to be born into my family and to have been so fortunate to be raised by my grandparents. Many of us Inuits can claim to have been adopted by our grandparents through traditional adoption. And so we usually say how lucky we are. So I will reflect a little deeper and share what I can so that we may all come out with a better understanding of one another. And I write in English. And since I wrote my notes in English and the notions I wish to talk about are Inuit notions, I think when I think of dignity, it relates first to the way I was brought up. My grandfather, my ernik, always showed respect for me. So the word I would use is susuyutinik, to have respect for one another. Susutsanik is having respect. So I was raised by my grandparents. I learned of the respect they showed to others. I learned not only through their words, but by their actions. And so most Inuit are raised to have respect for others, and in doing so, they have respect for themselves, and therefore all that is around them. This was taught as being part of Inuit law, the way one should conduct themselves as Inuit. These faces are a few from my past, some of my ancestors. My great aunt is to the left, She's beautiful. She had strength, intelligence, and pride in being an Inuk. And it's very funny, when I was younger and when I looked at Inuit photographs of Inuit individuals, I never thought of beauty before. But when I look at them today and I look at black and white photos and I remark, my God, they're beautiful, you know? And it's just a notion that's coming to me now because, you know, I didn't see Inuit, I didn't see being Inuk that way before. And that's part of our dignity. My grandmother is below. She had great resilience and a strong Inuk spirit. The man above her is Inukpak from Inukjuak. He was older than the other two. He was probably born in the late 1890s. But his face, to me, represents resilience and the experience of change, the change we experienced in the early 20th century. Inukpak of Inukjuak. There's a lot about him that I'm not going to talk about because I don't have time. Now, Aisa alasua Koperqualuk. Atatatsiara, my grandfather, Kisiani, but Irniga, my son. He served as a role model for many because he lived as he spoke. And to me, he had great love, patience, strength, wisdom, and he had dignity. I think the first time I got a sense of what dignity meant to him was when, as a young girl, he told me how proud he was of our cooperative association, and he was involved in it. Some of you might know about our co-ops, our federation, Fédération des Coopératives du Nouveau-Québec. So at the beginning of the Inuit cooperative movement in the 1950s, he and a few others, men and women, built up funds by creating Inuit art, sculptures, prints, and clothing. This small movement was created from a dream of autonomy. He said, it was so that we would never have to hold our arms out for money, so that we do not rely on outside money for our living. He could never imagine us Inuit being beggars on our own land, except that the economic system in place was making us out to be like that. The Northwest Company continues to run retail and grocery northern stores, which had originally been owned by the Hudson Bay Company that was created in 1670 in England. That made us near beggars. But it has been 50 years since the cooperative movement began, and those co-ops are entirely owned by Inuit. One of the purposes of the cooperative movement was to ensure that Inuit would be trained and manage their own co-ops. So they are Inuit owned, they're based on language and culture, and they strive to make everyone equal, to remove poverty from the communities. And it was a dream to govern one's own society, in which the cooperative movement was born. Today, the Federation, the co-ops, together with their federation, run revenues in excess of $300 million annually, and is growing all the time. Eskimo Govugut. And are these images not typical of the Inuit? Fur around their faces, smiling. Koperqualuk told me, we are Canadian and we are Eskimo. In those days, we were still calling ourselves Eskimo, and there was nothing wrong with that. And there still isn't anything wrong with it, because Eskimo to some other indigenous cultures means eaters of raw meat. Sure, we are eaters of raw meat. It's okay. We're proud of that. And we were, you know, while others were kind of using it pejoratively, we were saying, hey, that's who we are, you know? We are Eskimo. And, but our aspirations for autonomy had to be based on our culture, our environment, our territory, all that is related to our Inuitness. Inuit at the co-ops would be hired to manage, learn about managing and finances, and they would do this in Inuktitut, and they continue to do this today. It would be a way to move toward autonomy. But I'm not only talking about autonomy here. We Inuit chose to be where we are today, calling our land our home. Our relationship with Nuna, land, is crucial. It took innovation, creativity, intelligence, perseverance to be able to live on our land. With our family being the basis of our lifestyle. In our homes, it was not only about what the role of the Inuk man or the role of the Inuk woman was. It was not only about survival. We often mention survival. It's not only about that. We had set up a system whereby each person's identity was constructed within family, built up to keep the family ties strong. Kinship had and continues to have an important role. The relationships we have with our family also defined the relationship we had with those outside our family and all other beings outside our family. I recently asked my group of Inuit students to write about their sanayik or aknachutik and their saunik, the fundamental aspects of a growing Inuk child's identity while they're growing up. To me, their stories, they told sometimes with humor, as the Inuit humor often shows up in their writing too. And it also showed me in their writing how strongly we are still linked with our ancestors. And that link is within our naming system. Saunik means the one who you are named after. Before the birth of a child, there's a whole process of thinking out with the parents and the grandparents, who are we going to name our child after? Because it becomes the identity within the community of that child. So I love to explain my name, Xilukri. This is my name in Inuktitut. It's like my middle name, but it's my Inuit name, which is the name of my great-grandmother. Therefore, my great-grandmother's son, Koperqualuk, his mom was Xilukri, right? I was named after her. So he always called me Mom, Anana, Ananak. I grew up as his Ananak, his mother. I grew up as the mother-in-law of my grandmother. She was my daughter-in-law. We didn't always get along. I like to joke about that, but sometimes, you know, that's how things work out. But all that identity, and Pita, I'm sure he will even talk more about the importance of that, but it defines us as who we are in the community, in our family, in our kinship relationships. These are crucial to us. It defines how we are going to relate to our people, how we're going to have to help within our family, be contributing members of our society, and so on. So the fact that all of my students were able to explain who they were and who their ancestors were, it was very revealing of how we are still closely linked to our own ancestors. It was a real pleasure. It's important because that's the way we do things the Inuit way, creating our identity through the link with our ancestors and kin that we continue to practice today. And that is one thing that Christianity did not make disappear. I think we kept our dignity about it. Though most of us may not have the knowledge of the origins of our naming system, which was based on reincarnation. Today, we wouldn't dare talk about believing in reincarnation because we are too Christian these days. Then there was the relationship with the outside world, living in an environment where we mainly relied on animals for our sustenance. Also meant that we had a special relationship with those animals. You can see it in our legends, the bears, the caribou, the wolves, the seals turning into human beings, and vice versa. And striking conversations with one another or with us. And there is Ichalup Napa, the half fish, half woman, whom several of you have heard of as Sedna. She was like the big boss mother under the sea. And Inuit really respected and revered her. So in spite of having to kill animals for our living, we strike a relationship with them in which we show respect. Yet our hunters, Asivaktit, must learn and train early in their lives to become Asivaktit. There had to be a lot of discipline from an early age for a young Inuk man in becoming an adult Inuk man, one who would become able to support a family. He learned of the land, becoming knowledgeable of the animals, of the movement of animals. And if he did not gain capacities to do such things, if he did gain capacities, he could start a family. He could have a wife. If not, a potential bride could be refused. This was part of the way Inuit governed themselves. Many things changed these modern times, yet our values, Inuit values, continue to exist in one form or another. Yet we continue to be challenged to maintain our Inuit identity. Our youth may soon find it difficult to speak Inuktitut. Many of our young men are deeply troubled. I am sure that our elders have questioned and tried to gauge where we are at and where are we going. And there are many more challenges ahead. I can mention political and economic successes we've had. I can go on to describe all of the wonderful stuff that happens, the various agreements we've had with the governments. Our leaders have brought about an ongoing relationship between Inuit and the outside world. There are companies that come to do development work, such as the Raglan nickel mine in Nunavik, in which we have an impact benefit agreement. But when we look at the possibility of further mining projects coming to the north, there are very huge projects that could be coming to the north in the future. Not now, probably because metal prices are low right now, but there's one particular project that might go close to Aupaluk, which is a very small community of 200 Inuit. And that mining community could bring thousands of employees. It could be the disappearance of Aupaluk. But that community is very important to the Inuit living there. It's nice to think about mines bringing jobs to Inuit, but the impacts on our culture our culture could be enormous. Anyhow, I could describe and go on and talk about various things, but I'd like to get to fundamental things. You know, in my work right now as a member of the research team in the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, I had the opportunity to listen to an expert panel on Indigenous law. And I've also written and did some beginning research towards Inuit customary law. But at that expert panel, I was really, really delighted to hear other Indigenous people talking about their own law, their own Anishinaabe law, about the importance of kinship relationships. And I was amazed, and I thought, wow, yes, that sounds like us. Because it made me want to explore further what is our Inuit law. At that expert panel hearing, I was hearing professional researchers of Indigenous law, and they were Indigenous, they were Anishinaabe, and from other groups as well, saying, well, this is what we can do to have, to integrate Indigenous law into Canadian law, and they made various suggestions, but I think one of the fundamental aspects of being able to do that, first we need to get it back. First we need to relearn it. And I think as Inuit, we have been going on, accepting various different values, learning about Christianity, welcoming development projects, welcoming the Hudson Bay Company, creating our own cooperative association, all based on a dream of wanting to gain autonomy. But if we are going to ignore our language and not work hard to keep it, or ignore the way we must govern ourselves by following our laws, we are pushing it aside and not respecting it, not respecting ourselves, therefore. So we need to learn it back. How do we govern ourselves? We need to also define it as well in this new world. So that's like the fundamental thing that I really wanted to touch at in this presentation of mine. I thank you for your attention, and I'm very pleased